I'm Cara, and today I'm going to show you how you can use your Cricut Maker to make this swim top. Now this swim top is from the Simplicity and Cricut collaboration line, and you can buy it in your Cricut design space, and there are two different versions that you could use. One is a little bit shorter and has straps, and this one's a little bit longer and it has a bow that you can add if you want. Now there is only one size available. It's a size 10, a pattern size 10, not a dress size 10. So if you're close to that size or a little bit smaller, just a little bit bigger, you can make it work, because swimsuits have negative ease, meaning they're meant to be smaller than your actual size. So if you are smaller than a size 10, you can just make that back come in a little bit further. And if you're just a little bit bigger, that stretch might make it fit you just right. Now to begin, you're going to want to make sure you have your swim fabric, your lining fabric, different notions and things like pins and scissors, and your sewing machine, of course. And I also recommend getting a sew-in swim bra if you want the support. I have one from Dritz that I like that I've put in this one. So let's go ahead, let's begin. We're going to open up Cricut Design Space and get our fabric ready to be cut in our Cricut Maker. Let's get started. Okay, I've launched Cricut Design Space, and to find this pattern, I'm going to scroll down to the category of sewing. So here it is. We're going to go ahead and click View All. Then just search the word crop, and that will pull up this pattern. Now again, I've mentioned that there's two styles. Here's the shorter one with the sleeves. I'm gonna go ahead and do this longer one right here with the bow option. Go ahead and click Make It. Now remember, this is made to be a woven fabric top. We're making a swimsuit, so we don't need the interfacing. We're just gonna need pieces 4, 5, and 6. We don't need number 7. We'll want number 8, but let's go ahead and remove this piece of the bow because we will not be sewing it. And we'll want 9 and 10. So the first pieces of that lighter peachy color, I'm going to do that as my lining fabric. So you just highlight it, select your maker machine, and for the material, I chose to do spandex. It's a bit far down on the list, but you'll find it. So now that it's selected, you just want to make sure that you have your tools ready. So your rotary cutter and your water-soluble marker. And we are ready to go. So before you can use your machine, of course, you have to cut your fabric to fit. So you want to cut it 12 by 24 and then place it on your sticky mat. To do that, you just want to peel off your cover so the sticky side is exposed, and then carefully lay out your fabric on it, aligning it well with the grid lines. And this is honestly what took me the longest, is just trying to make sure it was nice and flat so that the cuts were as even as they could possibly be. Once it's getting nice and close, just line it out one more time, and then we go ahead and put it in the machine. So here's the machine, and you'll note that I'm actually showing you this example with my other fabric, not the lining. So yeah, I snapped my marker in, I go ahead and I slide the fabric in, and I hit the go button, and then the rest is all done by the Cricut, and I just take a little break. Once it's done, go ahead and release the mat and the fabric, and then peel off what you don't need, and you're left with perfectly cut and marked pattern pieces. So we've officially used the Maker to cut all of our pieces. Now we're ready to begin sewing. A few tips when sewing swimwear. Number 1, you want to use a ballpoint or a stretch needle, because the fabric will hate you if you don't. And I also recommend using a stretchy thread. You don't have to, I've done it before without it, but it is nice to just have a little bit more stretch and give in your swimsuit. Now, you may have noticed already that each of our pieces has a dart on it. When we have finished all the darts, we're going to go ahead and assemble the lining of the swimsuit so that we can sew in the bra cups. I always do that first because it makes it fit a lot better. So we'll do the whole lining, all the darts, sew it together, do the bra cups, and then we will be ready to add our outside fabric. Woo! So let's go ahead and get started with the sewing. So here I have a pattern piece, and I'm going to use this one to show you how to do a dart, because as an obvious right and wrong side, where the lining, it can be kind of hard to tell which side is the right and wrong side. So again, here's the right side, here's the wrong side. So using the marks, you're going to pinch the right sides together and try to line up those dotted lines as best you can, and then make sure that it goes through the center of the circle at the end. And if you want to go ahead and pin it, just put those pins in at a 90-degree angle to the fold, just like this.
Once you feel like it's nice and secure and you're ready to go, then you can go ahead and stitch it. And you want to start from the outside, working your way in. And I always go a little bit past that center point at the end to make sure that I've really gone all the way out so I don't get a weird kind of dent thing at the end of my dart. So I am stitching this dart right here. And another tip for it is that if you stick a pin through those big dots, the pin should be through the center dot on each side. That's one way to make sure that it's lined up if you're not for sure. So here I have pinned my number 1 pieces, right sides together, and I've matched this dart up. You'll notice that I've pushed the darts down, and I'm going to go ahead and just sew my seam right down the middle.
So I have finished all my darts and I've begun sewing the pieces together as per the instructions. But one of the things I noticed with these number 1 pieces is that when I sewed them together, the dart is just a teeny bit off. Now I'm not going to fix it because it's the lining and no one's going to see it, but it makes me wonder that maybe with my fabric pieces that we'll be showing, I might sew this seam first and then do it as just one dart across to make sure that that line is nice and even. This is what it looks like once we have all the lining pieces sewn together. You'll notice I haven't done the back piece yet because I'm going to adjust that on my body, or on my dress form in this case, to see how I like the fit. Now the first time I ever sewed a swimsuit, this is the stitch they had us do. You just do a straight seam down within your 5/8 seam allowance, and then you just go again about 1/4 inch from that and sew another seam and then cut off your excess. So that's what I've done on all of these. And I did that stitch for this because you can do that on any basic machine. Now if you have a serger or you want to do some zigzagging stitches, by all means go ahead and do that. So now I'm going to show you how I'm going to insert one of the easiest swim bras of all time using the Dritz Sew-In Bikini Bra. For anyone who hasn't sewn a bra into a swimsuit, I want to quickly show you how to do that. So what I'm using today is the Dritz Sew-In Bikini Bra. You can get it online or you can get it at a local craft store like a Joann's, for example. And what I've done is I've put my lining on with the seams facing out, because your seams are going to be sandwiched between your swimsuit fabric and your lining fabric so that no one sees them either way. So that's facing out, and then I put the bra on top, and this is actually how it's going to be worn on the body. It's just like this, just with the outside swimsuit fabric on top. And I've pinned it to fit the curves of my dress form. If you want to do this on yourself, you could do it and just pin it where you want it on your bust. So I'm going to tack it in on spots with a seam so that there's a little bit more to hold on to. So I'm going to tack it just at the top points of each cup, in the center of the swimsuit elastic, and then on the side seams I'm going to tack the elastic in on that. So after that's all tacked in, we are ready to attach our outside fabric, and I'll show you how to do that soon. And then just so you know, right now I've actually just clipped the seam allowance in the back so that I can adjust it to match best with my exterior fabric before I sew it together. So let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so I went ahead and I did a seam. Remember, for this pattern, the seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch. And I'm just going to trim it and then overcast right on the edge, and then go ahead and make this start so that it's just one nice line on both sides of the number 1 pieces. And I used a darker thread so that, of course, you can see where exactly it is that I'm sewing. I did that. I just overcasted the back, trimmed off my seam allowance, and then I did the dart from here to here in one solid piece, and it made that line straight across. Though this line ended up kind of moving a little bit, but honestly, with all of the motion going on with the pattern, I think it's going to be just fine. So I think you could do it either way. It's just kind of up to your preference. And again, you might not even need this dart because we're using a stretchy fabric, and this pattern is made for a woven fabric that doesn't have movement in it. So I'm just doing it because I kind of like the vintage feel of it, but you could honestly make this swimsuit without it. We are ready to attach our lining and our outside fabric together. I've just pinned it on the top, and we have the right sides touching, so the pretty sides touching, the ugly sides facing out. We're gonna sew the top. One helpful tip for doing this is to start from the center and go out, and then center and go out, instead of going from one end to the other, because it's just easier to deal with that curve there. And then I'm going to sew most of the bottom and just leave a little bit open to flip it right side out, and then we'll close the rest. So let's go ahead and I will show you the steps as we go. Now that I've finished the upper seam between the two fabrics, I'm going to cut my seam allowance and I'm going to understitch, and I'll show you what that is in just a second after I've removed my seam allowance. I've trimmed my seam allowance and I've added a few notches on the curve to help make it lay flat. Now what we're going to do to help keep the lining on the lining side and not have it sticking out is we're going to turn it right side out, and we are going to take the seam allowance right here. Oops, sorry. The seam allowance right here. And we are going to sew it to the lining side right next to the seam. And I'm going to use a matching thread for that, and I'll show you in my machine in just a second. Okay, so here's our seam we just did between the lining and the swimsuit fabric. We're going to sew just a straight line on this side of the lining, having our seam allowance right underneath it so that we're attaching the seam allowance to this so that it won't stick out very much, or at all, hopefully, when we wear it. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew as close as I can to that seam allowance. Sorry if you can't see that. Nice and slow. We'll do a few stitches. All the way across. Okay, we have stitched the top, we've stitched the bottom. Now we're going to turn it right side out. Okay, it's looking good, huh? And this is where you might want to play with the fit a little bit and figure out if you want to take in the back a little bit more, because remember this was made to have buttons. So if you want to, you can actually do buttons. I'm not going to for this top. So if you need to, you can take it in further to make it tighter, keep it looser if you want. Okay. So we stay stitched the top and the bottom to keep the lining inside so it won't show when you're wearing it. And then with the back, I'm just gonna have this seam show so that it's not, that's just the easiest way to close it. So I just sewed right down here, and then I'm just gonna cut it off and either overcast it or just do what I did on the other seams where I just do another stitch down the side to make it look a little bit nicer. But other than that, we are done. And with that, we are done. Let's go ahead and look at the 360 view of this swimsuit. The all began with your Cricut Maker machine. Pretty awesome. Questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below, and please subscribe to my channel if you want more awesome crafts like this.